Hi, this is Rob, one of your FSCJ Adult Ed academic tutors, and in this video we are going to talk about using your Texas Instruments 30XS calculator to use the quadratic equation and quadratic formula, because you will have those questions on the GED. So the first thing we need to remember is how to identify a quadratic equation. The quadratic equation is my top equation. It is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. And for the GED, they may say it's equal to 0, or they may say it's equal to y. If they say it's equal to y, what we are looking for is y equals 0. And this is how we find the values of x that make y 0. We must remember the a value is the coefficient of the x squared term, the b value is the coefficient of the x term, and the c value is the plane number. We need these to put them into the quadratic formula, which is this x equals and this nice little fraction here with negative b plus or minus the square root of the term b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And while it sounds like a lot, the calculator will do all of the heavy lifting for you. All you have to do is punch the keys correctly and identify the correct items. So first thing we want to do, we are going to do the equation 2x squared plus 5x minus 3 equals 0, and we need to identify a, b, and c. A, we said, is, going back to the quadratic equation, the x squared's coefficient, so we have 2x squared, so a is 2. B is the coefficient of the x to the first power, or the plane x term, so in this particular case, b is 5. And c is the number term, so we look in our equation 2x squared plus 5x minus 3, and c is negative 3. Now that we have everybody identified, we are ready to punch buttons on the calculator. So we're going to turn our calculator on. We are then going to come over here and press the N over D key, and you see that gives us a fraction. Now our formula says negative b, so b is 5, so we're going to make it a negative, so we're going to hit the minus or the negative key. Do not hit the subtraction button. Your calculator will not like that. You're going to hit the negative key down at the bottom, and then you're going to put in the value. Now what do we do with this plus or minus? We are going to run this through the calculator twice, once with a plus the square root of this term, and once subtracting. So first we're going to say plus, then we're going to use the second key on our calculator, and we are going to press the button that is labeled x squared, because we note above it is a root sign, and you see the calculator pulls up a root sign. So we say plus the square root of, and then underneath the square root we start with b squared, so we're going to say 5, and then we're going to hit the x squared button, and you see it gave us 5 to the second power. Then we're going to say minus 4 is a constant, and then a is a value who can change, so we're going to say 4 times a, which in this case is 2, and it's minus 4ac, so we're also going to multiply by a negative 3. Now we have all of our numbers in the numerator. We're going to hit our down arrow and come to the bottom, and our bottom term is 2 times a, so we're going to say 2 times a is 2, so 2 times 2. We are then going to press our arrow key and get out from the denominator, and get off to the side, and we can hit enter. And our first value is x equals 1/2, or, because we need to go back and run our terms again, we're going to move our key up by hitting the arrow key. You notice the arrow key got us to highlight the entire quadratic formula. We then hit enter again, and look, it pasted everything We now press our arrow key, and we are going to move it back to where we had that plus sign in front of the root, and we're going to change it to a minus sign. Now we go back out. That's a lot of arrow key pressing, but once we have done, our cursor is outside the entire term. We may hit enter again, and it says x is 1/2 or -3. So our answers that we will look for on the GED, because it will be a multiple choice, we're going to look for the answer that says 1/2 or -3. Either of these terms works, so this is a question where there are two solutions. We will talk about why in the video about factoring to solve a quadratic formula, because this video is specifically about using the calculator to solve a quadratic formula. For our next example problem, we are going to solve as y equals 0 for 7x squared minus 10x plus 3. So for that, we have identified our a value is 7 because that is the coefficient of the x squared term. Our b value is -10 because that is the coefficient of the plane x, or x to the first power. And c is 3 because the number we are adding or subtracting is just 3. So now we are ready to start inputting in the calculator. We're going to press numerator over denominator. And we're going to say -b. However, 10, our number is -10. A negative times negative means we can just enter a positive 10. And then we'll say plus, because we're going to start with the positive root value. Then we're going to say second and add our root. Now our value is b squared, while b is 10. We know whether it is -10 or positive 10, that square will be positive, so we can just say 10x squared, and then we can say minus 4 times 7, because 7 is a, and times 3, because c is 3. Then we may come down here to the denominator, and that is 2 times a is 7, so 2 times 7. We get our cursor out of the term and off to the side so that we may hit enter. And we see for our first value, x equals 1. Now we're going to go back, move our cursor up, and highlight the entire quadratic formula and press enter. Then we can come back, use the arrow key, and move over until we get to that plus sign, and we are going to turn it to minus the square root of all this term. Navigate our cursor back outside of the term by pressing right until we are back out, and then we may hit enter, and our second value is 3/7. So the two terms that make y equals 0 for the quadratic equation 7x squared minus 10x plus 3 equals 0, those values are 1 or 3/7. This has been using your calculator to solve a quadratic equation that needs the quadratic formula. Your quadratic equation and your quadratic formula are on the GED math test formula sheet. All we need to remember is how to identify A, how to identify B, how to identify C, and then inputting everybody into the calculator correctly. Thank you, and keep learning.